So, if you've ever felt like your English just isn't flowing naturally, like you're stuck translating in your head instead of just speaking, well, you are absolutely not alone.
Oh, definitely not.
It's such a common feeling, isn't
It
it?
really is. It's probably one of the biggest hurdles for language learners.
It is. You can, know all the grammar rules inside out, have a pretty good vocabulary list built up, but then when it actually comes down to expressing yourself spontaneously,
Yeah.
it can still feel, I don't know, stiff or just awkward.
Exactly. Stiff is the word.
Mhm.
We often learn English like it's an academic subject.
Yeah.
But what if the key to unlocking real fluency wasn't more grammar drills?
Right.
What if it was something much more fundamental, something you've actually been using your entire life?
Okay, I'm listening.
Today, we're diving into a really powerful and actually very natural method for building fluency, using stories. Ah, stories, yes. We've been looking into a resource that makes a very, very compelling case for this, basically arguing that narratives are kind of the shortcut to sounding genuinely confident and, well, natural in English.
Mm-hmm. So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack precisely why stories seem to be so incredibly effective for language learning, at least according to this source,
Okay.
and then map out how you can actually start using this method in your own learning, like right away.
And the promise here, I think, and what this source material really strongly suggests, is that this approach doesn't just, teach you words in isolation. It integrates the language in a way that it sort of transforms learning
Transforms it.
from maybe a struggle or a chore into something that feels more intuitive, engaging, and ultimately just much more effective for real-world conversation.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start at the beginning. Think back to how you learned your first language, your native language. Was it from a textbook?
No, definitely not.
Was it full of verb charts?
Absolutely not. No, you learned through immersion, right?
Yeah.
Through just listening to the language all around you. And this is the key part, through stories,
Right, bedtime stories.
bedtime stories, hearing your parents talk about their day, the little narratives in TV shows. Even simple games have stories. They're just
Yeah.
fundamental to how our brains process information and connect with the world.
Yeah, our brains are just wired for narrative, aren't they? We get cause and effect, character, plot. It's natural for us.
Exactly. And applying this sort of inherent ability to learning English is incredibly powerful. The source argues that when you engage with English through stories, it stops feeling like this dry academic puzzle you have to solve.
And it starts feeling more like,
Like a living, breathing way of expressing things, something you can actually step into and use.
okay, so the big question then. Why does learning through stories seem to work better, or at least differently, than those more traditional methods? The vocabulary lists, the pure grammar exercises, especially for fluency.
Well, the resource we're looking at lays out 3 key reasons. And this is where it gets really insightful, I think.
Right. What's the first one?
The first one, and maybe the most obvious, is just the power of context and memory. Trying to memorize words completely isolated.
Oh, it's so hard.
It's incredibly inefficient. You might, learn a fancy word like serendipity from a list, but without any context around it, it's really hard to remember when you need it and even harder to use it correctly.
Yeah, it's like trying to learn faces from just, I don't know, a stack of driver's licenses versus actually meeting someone and hearing a bit about them.
That's a great analogy. Exactly. And the source gives a good example too. Hearing words like forest, shadow, mysterious in a simple story, something like she walked into the dark forest where mysterious shadows danced. It immediately links those words to a mental image, right? A mood, the whole scene. And that contextual web, that network of meaning, makes the word significantly easier to recall and, crucially, use appropriately later on.
That makes sense. The context creates like an anchor for the word.
A really strong anchor. The source even mentioned some research suggesting vocabulary retention could jump by almost 40% when learned within a story compared to just learning from lists.
Wow, 40%. That's actually huge. Okay, so context is key. What's the second reason?
The second reason is that learning is fundamentally emotional, or at least it can be.
Okay.
Stories are packed with human emotion, joy, fear, sadness, humor, suspense, surprise, all of it. And when you connect with a story on an emotional level, those feelings get tied directly to the language being used in that moment.
Right. And how does that specifically help with like spoken English, making it sound better?
Well, that emotional link helps the language stick much deeper in your memory, for one. But maybe more importantly, it helps your own language production sound more natural and expressive.
How so?
Because instead of just retrieving a word, like pulling a file from a mental database, you're accessing it with some of the emotional resonance, the feeling you experienced when you first encountered it in the story.
Ah, I see.
This is really key, the source argues, to moving beyond sounding, a bit robotic
Yeah, we all know that feeling.
and toward sounding genuinely human, expressive when you speak.
That makes perfect sense. So you're not just learning the dictionary definition of sad, you're learning the feeling of sadness within a specific situation, and it's linked to the actual phrases people use to describe it in the story.
Precisely. And the third pillar, the third reason this resource highlights,
What is it?
it's about exposure to authentic, natural sentence structures, the way people actually talk.
Okay, so less textbook English.
Exactly. Textbooks often give you grammatically perfect sentences, which is fine, but sometimes they can sound a little artificial or formal.
Mm-hmm.
Stories, on the other hand, whether written or spoken, are where you hear or read how native speakers genuinely communicate in everyday life.
So it's less about consciously dissecting all the grammar rules and more about just absorbing the flow of the language.
That's a great way to put it. You absorb those common phrases, those idiomatic expressions, the linking words that make English sound natural.
Yeah.
Things like, I was just about to leave, or she didn't even notice, as it turned out, maybe, believe it or not.
Yeah, the little bits that connect everything.
Exactly. And the source really emphasizes that by repeatedly hearing these in a meaningful context, you start to internalize them. You start using them automatically without having to consciously think about constructing the sentence according to a rule. It builds fluency almost subconsciously.
That shift from consciously applying rules to just subconsciously absorbing and using the language. That sounds like the holy grail for fluency, doesn't it?
It really does.
Okay, look, seeing is believing, or maybe in this case, hearing is believing. Let's try to illustrate these points. We could use a short example story, similar to the one in the source material.
Yeah, good idea. And as you listen, try to pay attention not just to what happens, but to the everyday language used to tie it all together.
All right, here we go. So, imagine this. One rainy evening, Emma missed her last bus home.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so she's standing alone at the bus stop, and, wouldn't you know it, her phone battery is dying.
Classic.
Totally. Suddenly, a friendly stranger walks by and offers his umbrella. You'll catch a cold out here, he says, with a smile.
Nice guy.
Emma hesitates for a second, but then she accepts the umbrella. And, well, that small moment, that simple act of kindness, turned into a lifelong friendship.
Oh, that's a sweet story. And simple, right? Easy to follow?
Very simple, but think about the language packed in there. Like,
Yeah.
missed her last bus. Very common phrase. Phone battery dying. We've all been there.
Mhm.
You'll catch a cold. Offering advice, expressing concern, with a smile. Describing how someone acted. And that concluding phrase turned into a lifelong friendship.
Right. None of those are super complex grammatical structures on their own.
Not at all. But they are the absolute building blocks of natural, everyday, conversational English. You just heard them used seamlessly within a situation you can easily picture.
And the source pointed out how powerful it is to encounter a phrase like catch a cold, right there in a situation where someone is literally getting wet and cold.
Yeah, the meaning is instantly clear.
Instantly clear. And it has that little bit of emotional resonance, the concern, the potential discomfort.
It's that natural integration, isn't it? That's what traditional methods, like just lists, often miss out on.
Completely.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about why stories are supposedly so effective. Now, the really crucial part, how do you actually do this? How do you put this into practice to improve your own English?
Right. The practical steps.
Yeah.
The resource offers 4 main actionable strategies that anyone can really start using today.
Okay, let's hear them. Number 1.
First, simply start listening to English story podcasts. There are tons out there.
Yeah.
You can find ones specifically designed for learners, often with slightly slower speech or simpler vocabulary, or just start with short, simple stories in general. Even children's stories can be surprisingly beneficial at the beginning.
Good point. Don't underestimate simple content.
Exactly. The key is consistency and finding something you actually enjoy listening to. Don't force it.
And you probably don't need to feel pressure to understand every single word, right? Just follow the gist.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Follow the overall narrative. Listen for phrases or words that stand out or repeat. What's the second technique?
Number 2.
Read storybooks out loud.
Out loud. Why out loud?
Because this isn't just passive reading. It's actively practicing the physical act of speaking English sentences. It literally trains your mouth, your tongue, your jaw muscles to form the words and phrases fluently.
Ah.
It helps reduce hesitation when you then try to speak more spontaneously because your mouth is already used to making those shapes and sounds in sequence.
It's like physical training for your speaking muscles,
Yeah.
but using authentic language structures from the story. I like that. Okay, what's number 3?
The third technique is particularly powerful, I think, for really activating what you've learned. Retell stories in your own words.
Okay, how does that work?
You could watch a short video clip, maybe listen to a short story like we just did, or read a brief article, and then just try explaining what happened.
To who?
To anyone. Tell a friend, tell a language partner if you have one, or honestly, just stand in front of a mirror and tell the story back to yourself.
Huh. Okay. Why is that so effective?
Because it forces you to move from just passive understanding to active production. You have to retrieve and use the vocabulary and sentence structures you just absorbed from the original story.
Right, you can't just repeat it word for word usually.
Exactly. You're reconstructing it. And it really highlights where your gaps might be while also reinforcing what you do know.
Okay, retelling, got it. And the last one.
And finally, number 4, create your own mini stories. This is where you become the author, the storyteller.
Whoa, okay. Sounds a bit intimidating maybe.
Doesn't have to be. You could take new words or phrases you've learned recently and just build really simple narratives around them. The source suggests starting super small.
Like how small?
Like, yesterday I bumped into my old friend at the supermarket. And then just add maybe 2 or 3 more sentences, trying to weave in some of your target vocabulary naturally.
Okay, so just connecting new words into a tiny personal context.
Exactly. It's a creative way to make the language really personal and therefore more memorable. You're embedding that new information into your own narrative structure.
These all sound very practical, and the resource, it really emphasizes the results people have seen with this story-based approach, right?
Oh, yeah, it does. It describes learners who felt like they'd hit a plateau, maybe for years.
Been there.
And then they suddenly started experiencing breakthroughs after consistently using these story-based methods for maybe even just a few weeks.
Really? What kind of breakthroughs?
Well, they highlight a couple of key shifts. One big one was learners reporting they actually stopped that slow, frustrating process of translating every single sentence in their head from their native language.
Oh, that internal translation is such a common barrier. It slows everything down.
It really does.
Yeah.
And they found they started to bypass that step more often, to actually think directly in English much more frequently.
Wow. That alone would be huge. Anything else?
And perhaps just as significantly, they talk about how learners rediscovered some joy in the process.
Yeah. How so?
The pressure of getting every grammar point perfect seemed to lessen, and it was replaced by the simple pleasure of just following a story, connecting with the characters of the situation, and engaging with the language on a more human level.
That sounds much more sustainable long term.
Definitely. The source makes a strong case that stories teach not just the linguistic bits, the words and grammar, but also the confidence and sort of the relational ability you need for genuine communication.
So the main takeaway here seems really clear. If you want your English to sound not just technically correct, but truly confident and flowing, well, integrating stories isn't just some nice little add-on.
No, it seems to be a highly effective method, and it's backed by how our brains actually seem to work naturally.
So the advice is...
Start small. Don't feel you have to read a novel tomorrow. Find a simple story podcast, a short story online, something you genuinely find interesting.
Yeah, enjoyment is key.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the main thing is, start today. Just try one thing.
Okay. And maybe here's a final thought for you to consider building on all this. We've talked about stories being fundamental to how we make sense of the world, right? And how they connect us with others, often across cultures and different experiences. So think about this. By actively immersing yourself in English stories, you're obviously doing something practical to change how you speak.
Right, improving fluency.
But maybe you're doing more than that. Maybe you're also opening yourself up to entirely new perspectives, understanding different ways people think about things, perhaps even building unexpected connections with people just by engaging with their narratives.
That's interesting.
So the question to leave you with is, how might making English stories a regular part of your life actually broaden your world, your understanding, in ways you haven't even imagined yet? Something to ponder.